Everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have Christian Conte, who is here talking about his book, Walking Through Anger, a new design for confronting conflict in an emotionally charged world. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I think the whole world needs to listen to this right now. This is a worldwide problem on the World Wide Web.
There's some anger out there. I don't know if anybody noticed, but there's some anger out
Yeah, exactly. What do you think is the root of anger? I mean, if you were to generalize it, like what is happening to society now that there's just so much anger and vituperation?
Yeah, I think to me it's pretty clear. So I think there's a difference between what I call the cartoon world and the real world. The cartoon world is the world the way we think it should be.
Right.
Hey, everybody should believe what I believe. People should think the way I think. And then there's the real world that people think differently. And I think the degree to which we are attached to believing people need to believe what we think or what we feel, and then the degree to which they don't, well, that kind of adds up to anger. I mean, think
Mm,
about it. If you think you should be agreeing with me right now, and then if somebody doesn't, they get really upset. And I think
mm.
that's really the root of a lot of anger.
Right. Is that we have fanaticism. Someone described that once as fanaticism. It's like it's this and it has to be this, and anything that you say, I'm going to negate. So is that how would you describe what is anger? Is it someone once described to me, and I thought this was a pretty good description, but since this is your focus area, how would you describe or define what is anger? But someone said to me it's usually when your expectations are not being met. But how would you define it?
Right. Oh, I think I really love that. I mean, obviously, the textbook definition of anger is an intense emotion. It's actually a primary emotion. So anger is not wrong or bad in and of itself. It's a signal. It speaks to us. It says that something's not right. Now, whether or not that's not right because we created this alternate reality of a cartoon, where everyone should believe what I believe, and
Right.
all those people who don't, but or is it because we really do need to get out of it? Look, anger's not bad. Like that's a huge message.
Mm,
Sometimes anger helps you get out of a toxic relationship. It
mm,
helps you break free from an abusive situation. It helps you break out of a job that was a dead end job that wasn't
mm,
going to fulfill your potential. So anger is not bad.
mm,
It's but when anger controls you so that you become its puppet,
mm,
that's when it becomes negative and toxic.
mhm.
When you have to respond because, oh no, someone drove their car in front of my car
Right.
faster than what I thought should have happened. Now
Right.
I'm mad. That shouldn't have happened.
Right. So it's you said a couple of interesting things in that. First of all, anger is not bad, which I think most people, I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so and I don't know if you're on the East Coast or not, but anger is okay on the East Coast. It's kind of like the language everyone speaks. It's okay. What's the problem? On the West Coast, it's dignified. So if someone is angry, it's like, oh, are you angry? I'm getting bad vibes from you. Like, I'm run away, run away. But I think that
And
that's
that's,
one
but
thing.
actually, no, okay, so honestly, on the on the East Coast, so I used to live in Nevada for a long time,
Okay.
and I moved back to the East Coast. And yes, I do see a difference. Like this is funny. So when we first moved to Nevada in on Pittsburgh, I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Right.
And when you're on the East Coast and you're in Pittsburgh, there's a lot of road rage. I mean,
Right.
it's evident. And
Yes.
so if you try to cross, if you're on a bike and you try to cross the road and there's a car there, somebody's only telling you to go across because they want to hit you. It's totally different. So when I went out
Yeah,
west,
it's like this moving like this is not kind
yeah,
of like I'm like
yeah.
it's more like don't you even think about crossing the road.
Right. So when I remember one time we first moved out west, and I remember I was riding my bike and on the street, and the guy let me go cross. He said, "Go ahead, cross." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm falling for that. I'm not falling for that. Like you're gonna hit me." And he stood there for a while. He was smiling, and I was like, "When are you gonna get angry?" He's like, "I'm not angry. Just go across the road." And I think it's a different mindset. But I was talking about this earlier today, actually. Even in some place like New York City, where your environment shapes you, your environment impacts you, at least at a minimum.
Hmm.
And so when you think about this if I speak all over the country, and if I'm in the South, like I was in Texas one time, and I went into a gas station, and I ended up talking to this person for like 15 minutes. Like I'm just sitting there having a conversation, In New York, they don't have time for that. New York,
Yeah.
it's like boom, get in, get out, boom.
Yeah. What do you want? What do you want from me? Get away.
Right. And somebody else is pushing you out
Yeah.
of the side. And it's just sheer volume, it's the environment. And I think sometimes if we're not
Mm,
mindful that our environment impacts us, we actually get almost like a puppet. We get impacted this way or that without
mm,
realizing it.
mm,
And so part of awareness is recognizing how our environment influences us.
mm. So you said so one, anger is not bad. It varies by culture in terms of how comfortable people are able to um, express it. And then you said it's a primary emotion. And then I went to primary colors and say, what? Like, what does that mean? What does it mean? What? It's primary to what?
Well, let's say that if you kind of look at all cultures and you look at all, no matter regardless of language or whatever, you're gonna have happy, you're gonna have sad, you're gonna have anger, and you're gonna have surprised, and those, at least at a minimum, those four primary emotions are going to be consistent regardless of language, regardless of
Oh,
culture, or anything else. Happy, sad. Happy, sad, angry, and surprised. Are those are, and there are others, and there's so many lists, and we have so many people out there, and they're different categories. People might say, well, it's these are primary. No, that's great. In general, there are 4 to 7 primary emotions, and when you think about that, and this is very comforting. So I tell people all the time, we feel alone at times. When we're struggling, when we're in pain, we feel like no one else can know what I'm going through.
right,
But if there are really only 4 primary emotions and 7 billion plus people, that
right.
means at any given moment, CJ, there are millions, at a minimum, millions of people feeling exactly the way you do.
Yeah, so that's anger is one of those things that everyone can relate
Right.
to. You know,
Yeah,
whether you're Chinese, Buddhist, whatever you are, you'll relate to it. All right.
right.
So, so you and what's interesting is, and when I read your bio, you're a certified level 5 anger management specialist, which is level 5 is the highest possible. And then I thought, wait, what? Where is this from?
Right.
What
Because
does it mean?
absolutely, because it's the internet age. You could just make up anything. So am I full of crap or what? Yeah, no, actually, I feel really honored by that. The National Anger Management Association, they do international conferences I've spoken at for a
Mm-hmm.
while. That was kind of an honor for me to get that level 5. But to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, I got it. One of my videos I do at Getting Control of Yourself. It's
Mm-hmm.
like a DVD. I'm older, so like, listen, this started with a DVD,
Right.
and it's actually used in prisons throughout the world.
Wow.
To help inmates. I've always kind of vibed at a level where I say, if I can't make information accessible and practical for people, then what am I doing? So
Right.
when I go into prisons, when I go into places, like I'm not trying to sit and say a bunch of academic words and dress up in a suit and tie and act like I have a super persona. Like
Right.
at the end of the day, I'm a human being. We're all human beings, and I teach people stuff that works, like that says like you can walk away from me right now and try this. For instance, your expectations. Next time you're driving in a car and you think they shouldn't cut me off. That's pretty self-centered. What if you were to say, you know what? Maybe that person's on the way to the hospital to see a loved one, like, and you change your mentality from they shouldn't do that to they're doing it. I wish they didn't, but it's not the end of the world. And when you start to learn to align your expectations with reality, it changes things for you. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have whatever degrees and awards and all that stuff. At the end of the day, like I say to people all the time, if what I say doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what titles people give you or awards. That's all
But I just
BS.
assume, like, when someone's in prison, they have to have a high level of expertise in dealing with anger. Is that so? What does a level 5 mean? If I were a
So,
level 1, how would it be different than a level 5?
well, I think if you were a level 1, you'd say I still have some time to put in to figure out to understand some of this stuff. I think there's one thing to get stuff intellectually. It's another thing to live the message.
Mm,
I have a lot of young people who want to be speakers. They want to do what I do. They say, "Oh, listen, I can stand in front of a crowd and speak." I say, "Listen, it's not memorizing a speech. Being a speaker isn't about telling people a message. It's about living a message. And then
mm,
people want to learn about how you're living that message."
mm,
When it comes to level 5 and anger management in the prison system, here's what I do. I go in and I say, I don't like what's happening in the prison system. Nearly 7 out of 10 people who leave prison come back.
Mm.
That number is not okay to me. I don't think that should be okay to any of us. Most people are detached from the idea of prison because they say, well, I don't know anybody who's incarcerated, or I don't. So most people say that. But the truth is, when people get out, who do you think they're interacting with? If people reoffend, who do you think they're reoffending on? It's your family, it's my family, and who we are all, in my view, in my personal view, we're all connected. So if it's your family and I never met you, that's still as important as my family, because your family is important to you. And so I think it's important to me to go in and say, what we're doing isn't working. Let's try a different approach. But when you're in the prison, here's the difference between, let's say, a level 5 and a level 1. I see a lot of people who go in and they say, well, I specialize in anger management, and then they get angry in 2 seconds. Like, I'm literally going to good luck trying to get me angry. It's funny, years ago, my dad told me, about 15 years ago, he goes, people are going to try to get you angry just to see. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, I live my message. Like, I'm not making this up. This isn't for an interview or podcasts or TV or all that stuff. It's literally, I just live this message. It's a peaceful way to live.
And so tell me a little bit, since you have lived experience with folks, tell me about, and you've met so many prisoners and shaped their lives in different ways. What are the most touching stories that still get you right here, that you're like, gosh, I worked with this guy, here was his criminal record, and here's how your yield theory worked? And tell us first a little bit about yield theory so that we have context, and then some kind of stories from your lived experience.
Yeah, so context for yield. So I created something called yield theory back in the 90s. I developed this idea. I kind of shot up out of a meditation, and I had this concept about meeting people where they are. And it wasn't like, a lot of people can put lip service to that phrase, meeting people where they are. But do you genuinely go in and see the world from other people's perspectives? My view was, if I lived every day as another person, not just walked a mile in their shoes, but lived every day as that person, with their cognitive functioning, with their affective range, their ability to experience emotions, and their life experiences, I believe I would have made every single decision they made.
Right.
And I work with people who are serial rapists, serial murderers. So we're not talking about, like, when I say this, I'm not saying, hey, listen, someone jumped in front of me at the grocery store. Like, I'm saying, if I lived as that person, I'm not saying I would have done it. I'm saying, how can I say that I wouldn't have done that?
Right.
And the reason why that's powerful, and it's not just an academic or intellectual exercise, is when I sit with inmates, I wipe away judgment. I can't change a second of the past anyway. All I can change is from this moment forward. And that's true with inmates, and that's true with you, with me, with all of us. I can't change the past. I can focus on this moment forward. Right. And that's what I do with people. There are impactful stories. I had a guy who raped men, women, and children on the outside. When he got incarcerated, he raped every cellmate he ever had. He was in solitary confinement when I met him. To give you an idea of how powerful this is, and it's interesting, I do interviews most days for the past 6 months. So I do a lot. I don't often share this particular story, but whatever your energy, the way you asked it, I'll share it with you. This guy was, when I read his jacket the first day. Now, normally I don't read anyone's jacket before I go.
What's a jacket, just so I understand?
A jacket's like their record of what they've done to harm other people, how they got to where they got.
Yeah, so usually you go in free of knowing anything.
Right.
So it can be completely non-judgmental.
It's helpful for me. But because I started a new prison where I was working with guys who had failed out of every other prison they were in, this is talking about they were going to be in solitary confinement for life. And understandably so. A lot of people who've never been in a prison have opinions. Well, that's terrible for people psychologically. Yeah, it is, until you realize that that person's going to rape every cellmate they have. Wow. So are you going to say, oh, go ahead, you cell with him because that'll be nice? Yeah, then you basically sentence the other person to torture and rape. So because I deal with this like ridiculous intense stuff, when I actually read this guy's jacket before I sat with him, when I went home that night in the car on the way home, I cried. And I thought what he did to people was, I mean, I would never even share. I wouldn't even want that in the universe. People know about what he did. But so when I've worked with him, I worked with him for 6 months. And he threw himself fully into the program.
Mm.
Like he was like, I would write to him, he would write to me. Because in prison, when a lot of people are watching you, you always have to put on a front. Like, well, if I'm talking to this guy on the door, these guys are watching me. So I need to make sure I say to him what I think would look good to them. So what I do with inmates is I write to them. I stand on I talk to them, but I write to them. I write on a sheet of paper. So I'll give them a worksheet to work on, and then they'll fill it out, and then I'll write answers. I'll give it back, then they'll write to me. So he and we developed this nonstop, working nonstop together. The whole time I was with him, I thought, I have 6 months. What am I going to do in 6 months? This guy's been doing this his entire life. Right. I'm not making up men, women, children. He had raped everyone in his presence. Lethal, very strong human being. So I said to him, so one day we were talking, and his nickname was Monster, by the way, for what he did. So he was known throughout the state as Monster. Well, one day he was going back to his cell, and he had a single tear drop down his cheek. And well, in prison, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So the corrections officers came up to me and they said, "Man, Doc, you effed up that dude." I said, "What do you mean I effed him up?" They said that dude said on his way back to his cell, he said, "Man, Doc said I could be a mentor one day." He said, "Nobody ever told me anything positive in my life. In my life, no one's ever said anything positive." He said, "Doc told me I could be a mentor." 2 years later, I was speaking at a different prison. I had been done with that prison. He not only graduated the program after I left, he went incident free, got transferred to another prison. 2 years later, I'm speaking in another prison. I hear, "Hey, Doc." I turn around, it's this guy.
Wow.
Give him a hug. He had been out incident free, and he was running a mentoring program in this other prison.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow.
I can tell you, it's been 3 more years since that time. He still is doing well.
Wow.
Still doing well.
So do you think it was...
He's single-celled, and so if somebody's out there watching and they say, "Well, so did you pair him up with someone?" No, he's on what's called restricted RRL. He's still single-celled, which is great.
You mean confinement?
Right. No. He's not in solitary confinement. He's single-celled. Like he doesn't have a cellmate.
Okay, got it.
So most people will be double-celled. He's not going to be double-celled.
Right.
But he has been incident free. So as soon as people say, what is one of the best stories? That's one of the best examples of, I met him where he was. I wiped away judgment. I said, "Listen, I want to help you figure out what the best case scenario for yourself is." We learned about, and really when I heard about what happened to him, his biological father, so we all think we have judgments. "Oh, I can't believe he did this and that." His biological father and his uncle did that to him and sold him to other people to do it too. So by the time he got bigger, stronger, very physically powerful individual, well, now he had the power to do it to others. And so he did.
And he sold him to other people. Oh my God, that is just horrific.
To be honest with you, though, that's a Tuesday for me. Like that's what I
That's a typical Tuesday for you.
Like that's a Tuesday for me. That's what I do with my life. So yeah, I see a lot of pain in the world. That's why I developed what I do. It's why I live the way I live, because life is short. I promise most people in the world believe that their problems are really bad, but the problems I see kind of help me put my own problems in perspective and say we don't really have bad problems.
Well, I see the other thing that you did is that you saw possibility. You saw him in a different light than no one ever saw him. Like he saw himself like in a positive light versus being the person who is being used by everyone, frankly. It's like he could actually be of service. It's a completely inspirational thing.
But I believe in people. I believe in that human potential. We're stronger than what we get thrown our way. And we also believe what's thrown our way is the impossible. When what I've done for 21 years now is sit with people who have vastly different experiences of my own. And I learn. I listen and I learn. And somebody like him teaches me a lot. Like you can go through what he went through and come out differently, even if you go the wrong way for a long period of time. So he actually was someone who taught me a really powerful message. I talk about the ripple effect all the time. And we all know the ripple effect.
Right.
You do something, it extends beyond you. But he said, I was teaching about it in group, maybe about a month after I met him. And I said, he said, man, Doc, he waited till I was by myself. He didn't tell me in groups. He told me about my growth. He said, when you spoke about the ripple effect today, he said, everybody else was talking about, okay, I can make a difference. He said, be honest with you, I looked at it totally differently. He said, I remember when my first victim came into prison. He said, I was in a county jail and the dude came in. He goes, I remember raping him the first time. And now here he was coming in for doing the same thing. And he
Oh,
said,
wow.
that ripple effect hit me differently. He said, I didn't
Right.
have the words for it at the time. I didn't understand it. But when you just said it right now, you saw me shut down in group. He goes, that's what I was replaying in my mind.
Oh, wow. Wow. It's like almost like karma. He looked at
Yeah.
it as a karmic effect.
So
Wow.
the way I understand that word and live with that word, that resonates with me profoundly. I agree with that 100%. That's a karmic effect.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Tell me a little bit about the components of the yield theory. I mean, I'm definitely like meeting someone where they're at, listening, going in without any sense of judgment, feeling like I could do the same thing that you did. So, which is the no judgment, right? Like, until you live that person's life experience, how do you know that you wouldn't do
Right.
exactly what they did? So, what are the other components of it? Of the,
Let me let me preface this and I'll go into it. So you and I might identify with that. We might agree with that. We buy into that. Now, what about somebody who's listening and they say, "Oh, yes, I agree with that too." But what about those people who have those opposite political or religious beliefs that I have? So
right,
you think, well, my beliefs are this, and they have opposite beliefs, so
right,
I can't get right with them.
right.
The truth is, what I'm saying is, I'm getting right with every other human being on planet Earth, every other life form in the universe, because I don't know. How do I know? I only know my perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I only accept people who believe what I believe or think what I believe, what is that really saying about who I am? I want to accept people even if they think I'm full of crap. Like if I sit down with, I ran a mental health organization for years. I started a center for people convicted of violent crimes. So they would be sentenced to come to my groups. Well, obviously they're going to be angry at me. They come in like, who
Right.
are you? What's you? Instead of me going, I'm Dr. Con, I go, yep, absolutely. Why would you want to listen to me? Well, who am I? Who am I to give you information?
Right.
Exactly. So that's what meeting people where they are is really truly all about. Like accepting people, even people who disagree with you and think differently. And although honestly, CJ, most people will be like, oh yeah, let's identify with the downtrodden. Can you identify with the people who disagree with you? Because that's what true non-attachment is all about. It's
Mm-hmm.
saying, yeah, let me learn what you're seeing.
Yeah. It's huge when you take the time to get curious and wonder. Like I've talked to people who are completely different political persuasions than me that have completely different beliefs. I talked to a Montana farmer who didn't believe that two gay women could be have an acceptable, stable marriage. And then when I talked to him, like after talking to him for a long time, I'm like, God, I see your point. And then also he saw mine. Like it's like if you meet someone halfway to understand truly, then they'll meet you on the other end.
Yes, and I do believe that because you made the effort to listen to him, he was open to listening to you.
Yeah, yeah,
This is what I try to teach in Walking Through Anger. If you can take the effort, your first move is the quick fix. I'll just tell them.
right.
But if your first move is not, I'll tell them, but I'll listen, you'll get so much farther.
Yeah, because they want to. There have been probably a lot of people. So, and then the other person was I was talking to a guy who's in Washington State that is primarily Democratic, and he was a Trump supporter, and all of his wife and his children are all like super liberal, and he's always feeling like rejected. And I'm also like I just kind of got curious, like why tell me a little bit about Trump. What do you like about him? What makes you what's appealing to you? And I just sat through and just tried to understand. And once I understood where he was going, I could kind of like bring up other questions, like that would help him kind of think through the problem in a different way. But if I hadn't done that, I don't think. And this woman sat next to me and she said, I was just astounded. I was listening to you talk to this guy during the whole plane flight, And I was kind of astounded because she was super liberal and she was just like offended by everything that he said. And I was like, well, why?
Think
He,
about that.
yeah,
That's it. Think, how can you be offended by
well, he has
someone's
a right to believe what he. I mean, what right do I have telling what he should believe in?
But that's a gift that you have, because the truth is, most people, I feel blessed with that gift too. I'm willing to listen to anybody, but who am I to say my belief is the best belief? I believe very profoundly in what I believe. I'm definitely a passionate human being, but I'm open that someone else could teach me something that I'm thinking, and I go, oh, maybe that's completely wrong. I don't know.
Hmm. So if you look at your the life experiences, and I know it's hard to generalize, but you've talked to, serial rapists, people who had serial murders. Is there kind of a lived experience that creates the anger that then like if I were to understand, right? Because so there'll be people like they did the crime, they need to go in there. Why are we spending money and time actually trying to convert someone who's never coming out?
Yeah.
So like how do you respond in those instances? Like what is the common thread that you see is happening, and why is it important to care and invest and have
Yeah,
compassion?
so I definitely understand. I mean, I definitely get when people tell me, why do I waste my time on people in prison? I could literally spend my career in the business world, in the sport world. Like I work with some of the best athletes in the world. I work with Fortune 500 companies. I could spend my time with them. I'm passionate about what I do in the prison system. And I get when people are judgmental. I get when people are like, whoa, why do you waste your time? Well, because here's this. Let's say if someone's never getting out of prison, I feel why you might say, who cares? But those guys and men and women are influencing other men and women who are getting out. So do you
Mm,
want to really treat them as if, who cares? Or do you want to treat them as if, guess what? They're going to impact people who are getting out. When I go the last
mm,
prison, I started this movement, and I said to the inmates, why don't we work on three things: inner peace, education, and legacy. In a nutshell, here's what I said: at the end of our lives, we're all going to want peace. We know we master what we practice. So why are we going to wait till our end of our lives to start practicing peace? Let's start doing it early. Education. I'm not talking about book. You can have books. Wonderful. I love books. I read incessantly. I'm talking about personal growth.
mm,
And then legacy. I don't care what you did to this moment. I care about what you do from this moment forward.
mm,
And when I say that earnestly because I can't change a second of the past. So I don't care about the past. I care about this moment forward.
mm.
So now, why do I do this in the prison system? Because people are impacting people who are getting out.
But what does
And
that mean? What does that mean? So, so you have this guy whose life in prison. How's he impacting other people?
okay, young man, I was in a prison a few months ago. This young man said to me, "Psh, I ain't even done a dime yet." I said, my man, listen, I'm gonna hold this space for you and I'm gonna give you love, but I'm gonna tell this to you true, okay? You haven't done a dime yet. You're calling 10 years of your life a dime. Now, as a father, when I look at my own child, I say, I wouldn't want to call 10 years of her life a dime.
Right,
Let's think about what you're really saying. So now we started the process.
right.
Now he said to me, he said, but listen, my old G is telling me like 10, you haven't done a dime yet. I said, but listen to your old G. So then, a small prison, I was able to pull this guy in.
Wait,
I
who's
said,
old G?
so an old G is in a gang, is somebody who's been around, who's done it, who's been through the block several times, so
Right,
multiple times, many times. And if
right.
it's an old G, it could be somebody, it could be older gentleman who's been a gang member for a long period of time,
Okay,
lives and breathes this mentality.
okay.
So I actually called the old G and I said, listen, when you say a dime, I'm looking at this young man and I'm looking at his life and I'm saying I value his human life, that I wouldn't call 10 years of his life a dime. I would
Mm,
instead say those are 10 years of valuable life that this precious human being has to live.
mm,
So he broke down. This is stuff, again, this isn't stuff people know about. Like, this is me and him, and I had the old G, I had this young man. We're in the room together in maximum security prison, but I had flexibility, so I had both of them unrestrained. It was just the three of us. So I said, let's process, like, let's literally talk about this. What if we stopped at saying it's a dime? Because in rap language, in R&B language, you just did a dime. Guess what that's doing to our young people? They're saying,
Mm,
I need to spend a dime before I have any value. Are you
wow.
kidding me? You have to go to do a state bid for 10 years of your life before you have any credibility. You can't speak in some gangs until you've done 10 years.
Wow. Wow.
This
So it's
is stuff
complete.
most
It's like the
people
criminal
don't know.
mindset is completely different.
Yeah, most people just don't know this, but yet you're
Mm,
walking into your Target with other people who in your Target store. You're going to go to your grocery shopping. You're going with somebody who also is of this
who's done
mentality.
a dime, right? And is coming out 10 years later and he's thinking, oh, well, I'm probably going to go in again because that's what old G said. Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
it's attacking this mindset. It's attacking the
Mm,
mindset in general and saying, like, what is our mindset really, and what does it need to be? Now, of course, somebody who is, let's say, they're white, suburban, they come in with that mindset. They say, well, listen, just work hard, just do it. Okay, but that's not always opportunities there for people. So now we need to find the balance. What opportunities are there, but also challenge. You don't need to value your life as I need to do a dime before I have any credibility. You have credibility by being the right person, by having character, by standing up for the inmate over there who's too weak to get on the phones because the gangs have manipulated the phones so that weak people can't get on the phones. You stand up and say, you know what? No, this dude needs to call his family. Like there's so much more that goes on.
wow, it's interesting. Viktor Frankl, who wrote that book, while he was in Nazi internment camp, and it's very similar, right? Like it's about finding meaning. That's I assume what you meant by you said inner peace, education, and legacy. In this case, it's like, what is your legacy? You know,
Yes.
old G. Like I mean, is your legacy going to be continuing to perpetuate this kind of lifestyle for all the younger people before you, or is it something different? And if it's something different, how can we get there? So that's it's interesting because I totally see merit in doing that, but it's one of those things that I would have never understood unless talking to you, like why it's so important to do, because there's like this influence that happens for people in prison. Wow.
Yeah. So I think it's worth to me, a person who has life in prison is worth it to me because if I can help them become the type of mentor that can help teach the young man who's going to get out of prison, here's a different path. Or I do stuff in women's prisons to teach the older women to teach the younger. Here's a way to do this differently.
Mm,
Imagine the world. And we have this mindset like it's just this or just that. It's naive. And here's the problem that I see, and I talk about this in Walking Through Anger. We put a lot of this on other people to solve, but it's us. How much anger do we have in our own minds toward people who don't believe what we believe or think the way we think? That's not okay. That's putting that at you and I and everyone watching us right now and listening to us is contributing to the content of the universe. So, what are
mm-hmm,
we contributing? Kindness, peace, understanding, or judgment? Well, they should believe what we believe and they'll be all right.
mm-hmm.
What are we
Or
really?
anger, or you know,
Exactly.
sadness, whatever it is, the
Right.
primary emotions, or what is it that we're doing?
Right.
How did you, I was reading this interesting book about legacy. It's David Brooks was writing a book called The Second Mountain, and he talks about how people like yourself, actually, you're a person that he references in the book, meaning like the type of person who is working on something that is so important that you've spent your whole life dedicating and caring about and probably putting more hours, even though you could get paid higher in a corporate gig or in whatever gig, right? You're spending your time and energy in this prison because there's something in your heart and soul that just drives you to do that. What is that, and when was it present in your life?
Well, so if this finger said, "Oh, look, I'm so unique and I'm so special," and then it was like, "Oh, look at that pink finger over there. That's so
Yeah.
different than I am. That's so different." And then all of a sudden, someone comes along and goes, "Wait a minute, you're all part of the same hand. You're all together. All of you are together." That's how I feel about humanity, about all living beings. We're all part of the same source. So just because I've had an opportunity to not be incarcerated doesn't mean that I shouldn't place value on people who have been incarcerated. Like, let me show the value in guys who and men and women who've been incarcerated and say, look, I'm not making excuses. I would never excuse violence ever. As a parent, I have never yelled at or hit my daughter ever. She listens on a dime. I have a wonderful approach to parenting. I call it, there's a book I wrote called Zen Parent, Zen Child. Like, it's all about, like, there's a peaceful way to give consequences, be consistent. So I'm not about violence, but I'm not going to judge people who are violent just because that wasn't my path. Mm-hmm. We're all part of the same hand. And I think somewhere along the way, I realized that. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, they have a line that says, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." In other words, if I was in that person's shoes, that would be what would happen. I feel that. I believe that. My family and I, we were practicing Zen Buddhists, so we kind of have this belief that we're all one, we're all connected, all living beings are one. And so if your foot hurts, you don't cut it off. Oh, I hate my foot, it hurts. No, we try to heal your foot. Mm-hmm. In the same way, if we're all connected, why are we trying to hate on a part of us that is hurting? Why can't we heal that part of us?
And why prisoners? I mean, there are why prisoners of all the different audiences? What about that for you personally? Are you compelled?
I'm compelled because I think I'm claustrophobic psychologically, and I think, listen, I've met inmates who are more free than billionaires. I've worked with billionaires who are more psychologically imprisoned than inmates, and I've worked with inmates who are freer. I think ultimately what I do is I try to free people psychologically. And whether they are billionaires, I've worked with billionaires, because of the work I do on television, people can see I work with celebrities, I work with all that kind of, but no matter who it is, we all have issues. My tagline is there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who have issues and dead people. So if you're alive.
And for people who aren't familiar with Zen Buddhism, what does it mean to be free psychologically?
It's to recognize that you are the same as everyone else. Mm-hmm. In other words, the opening lines, there's a book called Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And in the opening lines of the Tao Te Ching are, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. In other words, this divine source. And whether you believe in something or nothing, all human beings have faith. That's just a psychological construct. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. And so people who are certain, Robert Burton teaches us, leading neuroscientist in the world, when you feel certain, that's an emotion. It's not a thought. This is why we get these intellectual discussions where people argue and they go, "I'm certain you're wrong." No, when you're certain, that's an emotion. Mm-hmm. You just became emotional. Mm-hmm. You're now not intellectual. This is not academic. This is sheerly emotional. Mm. So when it comes to belief, whatever it is, I personally feel this spiritual connection with people, that we're all connected, not just us as human beings, but animals, all living beings, and not just our planet, but every planet, every life. I mean, we're talking about a universe that's so big that we're talking about hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy. And then Hubble told us, 3 years ago, that there are 2 trillion galaxies, each with billions of stars. My goodness, so much life out there. And we're all connected. And I'll tell you something, and I didn't say this on my YouTube channel or anywhere yet, but I had a dream a few weeks ago. And my dream was interesting because I've always seen, and in fact, in my book, I talk about 7 breaths, a meditation I do that connects us with all universe, all galaxies, all dimensions. But I had a dream a few weeks ago that really, truly put me on a different world. And maybe it's just silly, and somebody's out there watching, they're going, "That guy's full of it." But it's just a dream. But I had a dream that I was on a different world, and it finally hit me, not just here, but here, that all life on all planets, on all galaxies, on all universe, we're all the same. That's powerful.
Yeah. So you felt it on an experience. Wow.
I did. When I woke up, I love that you said it that way, because that's exactly what I did. I woke up.
Heart.
Oh my gosh. I didn't have to write this dream down. I remember it to a T. Normally I would write it down, or I teach people that when you dream that. I didn't. I felt it. Yeah. When I woke up, I was like, that's different.
Wow. How did that shape you after you had that dream? Like, what
It's
changed
only,
you?
it's been a couple weeks, but I'll tell you, the first day, I feel like I had just wrecked on my mountain bike like a week, 2 weeks prior to that, and I've been feeling like I've been hit by a truck. I'm 46 years old. My body feels like it's been hit by a truck. That day when I woke up, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm lighter. Like I felt a little less pain. Like
Right.
I just felt like, oh my gosh, like I've been thinking and I've been talking about this for a long time, both in my books and my videos, that we're all connected. But now, and I haven't talked about it really ever yet, it's that we're all not only this world, all worlds.
Yeah.
Think about that. Like that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. I had a similar experience, not similar, but I had a transcendent moment where I kind of felt the same thing, where I was in a silent meditation. I had been talking for 4 days. And and I was asking, please, I know that we're all connected, but help me understand what this means. And I had this image of like a fish, and a fish was getting stuck by a log, and the fish was getting stuck in this part of the water because of the log, and getting so mad at the log because the log wouldn't let it get to the next place, blaming the log for all its maladies and inability to move forward. Okay. And then all of a sudden, like, a bird came down and took the fish, and then the fish again was eaten by the bird, and then the bird went. I mean, it was just like this continuing
Wow.
connection of all these different things that you don't understand. Like, if you actually are the fish, you have a limited perspective. You don't even know that there's something outside of the water. All you see is this thing blocking you, and you don't understand that there's a whole system of which this is. And so this meditation moved from like this fish to the bird to, like, something else, and then all the ways to the planets. And I was like, oh my god. And there, I don't know how to explain it, but when you feel that at it's not an intellectual thing that you read in a book, but you actually feel it. It makes a huge difference. So things that you had been saying, that you were saying before, all of a sudden felt like it feels like, how sometimes, like, to me, how I was reading this book and the same second mountain, and they talk about, like, you have a trajectory your whole life, and like, what is the narrative around that? And your narrative had been this, like, we're all connected, we're all one, no one's better than me, we're all, and then, like, all of a sudden feeling that at some visceral level. Oh my gosh, that's
It's huge.
fantastic.
It's huge. It's huge. And it's not just here. It's not just us. It's not
Yeah.
just, it's all life and all planets on all, in
Does it
all dimensions.
does it give you a different sense of your legacy knowing
Of
this?
course. Absolutely. So here's something that drove me. When I was a kid, my dad taught me about philosophy when I was a young kid. And I remember him teaching me about Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and then Descartes. And so I said to him, I didn't say this in this terms. I would never cuss my dad, but I said, "What the hell happened in between those years? How is there nothing until then?" And he said, "I guess people didn't really have, as much to say, or they didn't say it,
Yeah.
or it wasn't recorded." And he's right. Whatever. Maybe it wasn't recorded. Maybe they had something to say, but it wasn't recorded. But we had all this time. But that's not the point. The point was, for me, from that experience, was I said to myself, I will not leave this earth with people not remembering what I have to say. So I
Yeah.
thought, let me kind of think of a bigger perspective. And I've always been, maybe it's delusional, probably is, but I've always said, how can I help share this message of peace with a broader audience?
Mm.
And honestly, my whole life has built toward that with what I've done, why I've chosen what I've chosen. Like, I do love the work I do in the prison system. I literally just started a new prison yesterday. Like, I mean, this is what I love to do,
Mm.
because I think the psychological prisons that we're in transcend the physiological, the physical prisons that we're in. It's true, we're all trapped in some ways. If we think we have the answers and someone over here, oh, they just don't know what we know. Well, well, that's actually called asymmetric insight. When we believe we're really deep and mysterious, but other people are shallow and predictable, it's a
Mm.
psychological term called asymmetric insight. And the truth is, everyone experiences that.
Mhm.
See, I didn't set up saying, well, you guys get me. You guys don't. No, the world is what it is. To believe that we have the answers and other people don't is called asymmetric insight. I've been blessed to have experiences where I've worked with people that everybody knows on television on both sides of the political fences. And I would tell you that if you had these experiences, you'd probably be a little shocked. Like the people who everybody are rallying behind and, oh, I believe in this person, one-on-one in a counseling session that's confidential and can't be told about, is they laugh at their constituents. They laugh at them. I can't believe these idiots follow me. And it's both sides of the fence. And people actually think, oh, no, my side's the right side. And when you see this enough, my perspective has been so unique. And then I go in prisons and I see people who have suffered. I see it all over. And we really convince ourselves that what we believe is the right answer. It's all an illusion. To me, in my belief system, was all an illusion. I don't think any of us, not me, certainly not me, we don't have the answer. I just lead with humility, and I recognize I don't have the answer. So I go, teach me to the world, teach me.
Yeah. Wow. So you've kind of been taught by prisoners who can actually be free. If you can, I mean, to me, this is like the ultimate challenge. Like this is the hardest crossword puzzle you could imagine. Is you think, okay, if I can actually take a prisoner and make them more free than a rich free man who was in prison, then I will have mastered something in this lifetime.
Maybe, and maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. But maybe also, like, sometimes I've seen people who are billionaires, and I'm like, you're not happy. Like, you're trapped in terrible pain, and it's everywhere, and it's all over. So for me, I kind of don't go into boundaries or sides or this or that. And like, and that's part of what our belief system is in Buddhism, is that we're all equal, not just this side or that side, or this side that might agree with me a little bit more, or we're all equal. And it's being able to have that heart to open and go, teach me something. I think we can learn from anyone. Enlightenment comes from anyone, anywhere, at any time, and that means even the people you disagree with.
Yes. Hallelujah. This has been fantastic. We've been talking to Dr. Christian Conte about his book, Walking Through Anger, a new design for confronting conflict in an emotionally charged world. Thank you so much. What an incredible interview. Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing. Incredible.
Thank you for having me. I love your perspective, your energy. You're doing awesome work.
Thank you.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.